All right, if I can have your attention, we're going to get started today. First, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that's here. This is a great crowd. This is a big year for the planning department, a big year for the UDO, and there's a lot of material to cover in these next 26, 25 meetings that we have here. We have a packed agenda today, but I want to just take a moment. We're all talking about the coronavirus and just say that we have taken some extra measures here in this room in particular just to make sure that we're in a clean environment. The city at this point has not canceled any public meetings. We'll see how that evolves over time. Had a lot of questions just about this and about rezoning hearings and other public meetings that we have even tonight. So for now, they are scheduled as planned, but understand that some folks may not have been able to attend today, whether it's just for work reasons or health reasons. And so all of these meetings will be recorded and put on YouTube. YouTube. And so welcome anyone to go back, listen to those, watch those, and they'll make sure that we explain very clearly how you can provide feedback if you are unable to come today or any other meeting. And so that's a resource you can always go to if you want to go back and listen to the presentation again, had questions, but it'll all be recorded and on YouTube, and they'll make sure you have know where that is. And so with that, I will turn things over to Nan, and again, thank you all for being here today.
Again, good afternoon. Some housekeeping things. Lunch is provided over there, iced tea. I think Laura's doing attendance, so make sure she checks you in when you leave, so you get credit for attending here. We again want to thank you. We know these are really crazy times right now. I think you all know where the restrooms are, and Sandy has the parking validation, so if she has not already tagged to mark your orange sticker, please make sure that you give that to Sandra before you leave so we can validate your parking. And I also, some people, if you took the train or the bus or something, Alan has those coins or validations over
No,
there.
we've already taken care of that.
Oh, perfect, wonderful. There are a few new faces here from last time, so why don't we just briefly go around the room and just identify yourself and maybe who you represent, and then we'll hand it over to Alan and Laura to begin the program. Again, I'm Nan Peterson in planning. I'm just the facilitator, time watcher, and the keeper of the clock at this point. Laura?
I'm Laura Harmon with Planning, the UDO Project Manager.
Alan Goodwin with Planning, the Deputy UDO Project Manager.
Matt Langston, Landscape Architect from Landworks Design Group.
Thomas Habapro, also landscape architect from Design Resource Group.
Warren Cooksey, resident in South Charlotte.
Carmela Jarvie, Shamrock Drive area.
Jared Dittner, I'm a real estate lawyer and on the Barkley House, HOA, South Park area.
Wonderful, welcome.
Dave Wiggins, District.
Sullivan Plum, Planning Commission.
Richard Saltrick, Stormwater Advisory Committee.
Kay Odulante, Monroe Road area, Laura.
Brent Gilroy from Stonehaven, Southwest Charlotte.
David Walters, UNC Charlotte Architectural and Urban Design.
Helen Cinderella, Dilworth Community Association.
Rebecca Fan, architect, and represents South Park Association of Neighbors.
Terry Lansdale, Blackwater, North Carolina.
Philip Gussman, Planning Commission.
John Morris, Beacon Partners Industrial Development. Eric Severus, the same Charlotte.
Gerard Jones, Northwood Park in West End.
Maria Anderson, Hidden Valley.
Brady Lynn, zoning attorney with Alexander Rex.
Kevin May, Charlotte, Planning on the UDO team.
Jim Merrifield, MPB Properties, Commercial Development.
Kathy Cornett, planning. Sabrina Green, planning.
Okay, Cher, can we go on now? No worries.
Lisa McCarter, zoning. Alicia Osborne, planning.
I think we got everybody, so welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, Walter, apologize.
Walter Fields, recovering city planner.
Okay, now before I read that, I would say, oh, good, Tony's here too. I think we got everyone. Tony, maybe the grand entrance here.
Come right ahead, come late.
Do you want to say a few words? We're just going to kick off introductions and just have staff take it over.
Can't put too much. Run with it.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to turn over to Alan Goodwin to begin our presentation today.
A couple of things. I feel badly that some of our members don't have seats at the table, so feel free. I'm sure that people will make room for you if you guys want to bring your lunches to a table. Feel free to do that. If you're comfortable where you are, that's good too. Couple of things, we will be sharing these videos, video of today's meeting and future meetings. No longer live streaming it on Facebook, but we are recording them, and we'll be posting them to the Charlotte UDO YouTube channel, which is brand new, so it doesn't have anything on it yet, but this meeting will be the first thing that we put up there. Here's a link, and we'll also we'll email links to you to our YouTube channel. Just as of this morning, we have a microphone, so I know that in the past it's been difficult for people to hear what has been said around the room when we've been on Facebook Live. Hopefully with the microphone, we'll do a better job of picking up everybody's thoughts around the room. A couple of other things I wanted to cover with you. We have been and will continue to provide box lunches for the members of the committee, but we've been spending a lot of money on lunches and not using all of them. So in order to be a good steward of the taxpayers' money, going forward, beginning with the next meeting, we'll be sending emails to you ahead of the meeting, asking you to make a choice on the lunch that you want. Unfortunately, it's pretty much going to be the same choices that we have today, but we know some people prefer a salad or some people prefer a turkey sandwich over a ham sandwich. We'll be asking you to please tell us, if you're going to be there, what lunch you'd like, and we'll order that for you. We probably will even put your name on it. So be prepared, and if you don't respond to us with your lunch choice, you may not have a lunch if you come to the meeting. So we'll try to keep a better track of the money that we're spending on food. And then before I turn the presentation over to Laura, we're going to be touching on place types today. And I know that we've done that in the past as this group. We've talked a little bit about that, but there is another group that is providing feedback to our comp plan team on place types, and they've got their own advisory group, and they had a meeting last week, the week before, and I know some of us on this committee are also going and attending those meetings. I know that Ellen is on both groups, and I think Eric, but I'm going to ask Derek Dittner to, if you will, give us a little bit of a report back on what you heard at the, was it the March 4th meeting that you attended? Yeah.
So this was by far the most substantive of the meetings that we've had. Really well done and well received, and I think there was a lot of good information that came out of it. We started delving into place types, which we had just briefly gotten an introduction to prior meeting. They've broken it up into work, live, play. We were focused this time on work. There was 3 types of place types that we worked on: campus, general industrial, and light industrial. So we were given maps, and we had the place type descriptions, and we sort of looked at where these uses are currently and what's there and what's missing. And so some of the general comments that were made, particularly with respect to campuses, is that they don't relate to their neighbors. They're often insular and controlled by one owner, and so not really welcoming the community. Sometimes they're actually closed off, and folks don't have access to them, period, and there may be no way around that. Sometimes they may have amenities that would be beneficial to the community at large, so that's something to look at when they come up. But regardless, how does the property relate to its neighbors? We talked about needing green space and buffer from other uses, environmental justice, services within any of the employment centers. So these 3 categories tend to be large areas of sort of monolithic use. So what services do the folks who work there need? Are there safe connections for them to move about within that particular area or to adjacent services? Protecting tree canopy was important, storm multi-transit, multimodal to get to this, to these work zones. Greenways as a means of transportation and as a buffer. Programs for affordability, being able to age in place was discussed, although that's more of a residential issue. Making sure the existing population can remain, making sure if there's the ability to have a community benefit, we focus on that. And there was just a reference to general industrial being a gateway to the city, so wanting to do something to improve that as an experience for folks. That was really it.
Thank you.
Okay. Might flip the slides for me. I just wanted to introduce what we're going to talk about today a little bit, and then shortly going to turn it over to Alicia Osborne to talk more about place types. So we are starting in on zoning, and I think we'll go back through to show you some of the, remind you of some of the schedule that we have. Zoning being up first and what we'll be discussing for the next number of months, and zoning will be very largely based on place types coming out of the comprehensive plan. So we are developing zoning districts based on that. We'll talk, Alan, after Alicia talks, we'll talk about the organization of zoning, which will be a little bit different than the way we're organized today, and then we'll talk about what's next for you guys. So just a reminder, and because we have some folks that are relatively new to this process, reminding why we're doing a UDO, and we want this to, as you guys are asked, this for you guys to be able to have this information at the tip of your tongue. So we were consolidating our development regulations into a single document. We will put all regulations related to a specific topic in one place, and if you work very closely with our regulations right now, there are certain things like streets, for example, that you might have to go to 2 or 3 different places to figure out what the street lights are. In the future, that'll all be in one place. We want to, and this is really important for zoning, is to update and align our standards, our districts to implement the adopted policy, like the comprehensive plan and the place types component, simplify terms, create a common language across all of our regulations, and then increased use of graphics to make regulations easier to understand. This is the overall outline for the UDO. Again, we're focusing, and over the next months we'll be focusing on the zoning components. There'll be a significant chapter on subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. There'll be also a large chapter on natural resources, and then there will be administrative items that will be common to all of the regulations in the ordinance, as opposed to maybe right now some different approaches depending on what regulations, what ordinance you're looking at. Our schedule, first of all, thank you to the folks who came to the Tuesday drop-in. If that was focused on the TAD update, if you have any more comments on that, you can get them to Alan and me just as quickly as possible. We're going to be updating based on what we've learned. We'll also be coming to this group with a signs update text amendment in a couple of months. Obviously, we will be spending a lot of time on zoning districts between now and September. Then we'll move into subdivision, streets, and infrastructure through the remainder of the year. Early next year, talking about natural resources, and then wrapping up with administration. And you will get a chance to see, you'll be seeing the ordinance in pieces. We will also make an opportunity for when it's all put together, one last look at it for everyone to check and make sure the different components are holding together. Kind of as intro to what Alicia is going to talk about, we want to remind everyone that we have a vision that comes from policies and plans that are adopted by our city council. And the biggest one for us as we're doing this is the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And in that plan, among a number of things, it defines the place types that we want to create, or the type types of places, and we will be implementing that piece of it. Number of implementation tools, but from a regulatory perspective, through the Unified Development Ordinance with the appropriate zoning regulations to implement the place types. And that, I'm gonna hand it over to Alicia to go into more detail on that.
Thank you, Laura. So who attended the meeting last week, the strategic advisory? I think it was a number of us in the room. Thank you for participating in both. That's a lot of your time, and it's a big commitment to be involved in these long processes, but they're really important to what we do in our community. So the comprehensive plan, as you know, has been going on for about 18 months now. It's a 4-phase project, and we're currently in phase 3, the policies and strategies part of the project. And what the comprehensive plan is just to summarize for those who haven't been involved to now, is a shared vision for growth and development in our community. And it's really a way to think about how we're shifting in our thinking about how we create place. And this is kind of a good summary of what we're trying to do with the comprehensive plan. So this diagram really summarizes the first 2 phases of the plan, where we had really robust community engagement around establishing guiding principles, vision elements, and goals for the plan. And our goal really is to create complete neighborhoods in the community. So this is how all the pieces fit together. Depending on who you ask, this is the Wheel of Destiny, but it's the same graphic before. It was just a more interactive way to engage our community around, here's our vision, here are our goals. How do all these pieces fit together? And let's have a conversation about the types of places that we want to create to support our broader vision. I think once you're in the planning process for about 18 months, you start to lose sight of where we're going. And so this graphic has really been impactful in helping the community connect the dots between the 18 months of work and engagement that they've given us and where we're trying to go with the plan. So this is how the plan document will pretty much be organized. And you may see some new elements, and that's an equitable growth framework. Remember the first part of the planning phase, we talked a lot about the equity atlas and kind of the disparities in Charlotte, and how do we move forward in thinking about an equitable community, not just in our engagement strategy, but also in how we create policy. So we will introduce that into the plan. We're right here in this phase where we're talking about what kind of policies, programs, and projects do we have or need to create to support our broader vision. Next slide. Most of you are familiar with place types. It's really a new classification in creating more holistic communities, thinking more broadly about land use, character, built form, tying those things into mobility, and also introducing quality of life aspects of our infrastructure, such as natural features, trails, parks, and open space. So we went from, I think, maybe a 30 or 40 palette, and here we are with 11. And we had some ideas last week say, you probably don't need 11, but here's where we are today, thinking about how do we organize the types of places that we want to create in our community. And where we've landed is into 3 big buckets, and Derek mentioned work, live, and play. The work organization, I'll get to it a little soon later, talks about those employment opportunities in our community. Where do people go to work? The live is about neighborhoods and the types of things that you need to support a complete neighborhood. And then the third grouping of place types is about where do people meet together in terms of activity centers, regional activity centers, community activity centers, and those types of things. Next slide. So the first segment, the workplace types include commercial, campus, light industrial mixed use. That's what we're calling today. I'm looking at Laura because I think we changed it. These things will change as we're having conversations and getting feedback from our stakeholders. And then general industrial. So this is how the cards, and they kind of look like monopoly cards if you think about it. This is how we've shared it with our stakeholder group. We wanted to be real intentional about simplifying how we talk about place types and accessible language, being highly graphic with the materials to make sure they understand. These are the elements of our community. Are we missing anything? Are we getting it right? We're making sure they understand the language that we're using next time. So each one of these cards and the sheets that we're sharing with the community talks about, here's what we're trying to achieve, the broader goal. And then we summarize the land uses and make sure that we have pictures to illustrate what they look like. And then talk a little bit about character, building character and form. How might these things appear in our community today, and what are we aspiring for these things to look like? And this is another part of the place type sheet, or the example of the handout that we've been giving people. These are notable characteristics to make sure they understand what these things look like, and the conversation is very different with our strategic advisors. They're more community members and folks that are not as technical about the content, so we make sure that everybody has a complete understanding of what we're trying to convey about the place type. One thing I wanted to make clear with this group about the place types and where we are with the comp plan is that we will not be mapping the place types in this phase. The first phase with the adoption of the comp plan, we will adopt the palette. And that's getting everyone to agree in principle. These are the types of places that we want to create to achieve the vision that we have. Once the plan is adopted, we'll map with the community. And that's to allow for a more detailed conversation about here's what these places will actually look like when we start to map it. And that's a more extensive process that we think is necessary, and also gives the opportunity for the community to help us be more comprehensive in our thinking about when we map the places. Any questions? No questions? Okay.
Well, actually, I do have one.
Okay. I saw it.
Read my mind.
I did.
And
A little
by
bit.
community, and I'm sorry because I got cookie in my mouth now.
Oh, that's fine.
Community, you mean, who exactly?
Everyone that lives in
all
Charlotte.
citizens?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
That was my question.
Yep.
Okay, you read my mind.
So our strategic advisor groups are, it's roughly, I think, 330 at our meetings. The first meeting we had roughly 103, and then 130 at the last one. So we've been having really good turnout, and we're accepting new members throughout the entire process, so that process isn't closed. It's anyone who wants to participate. We have a meeting, we'll make sure you get the upcoming meetings, and they're posted on our website as well. Okay?
Don't want to jump ahead, but will we be doing a further advanced type of activities that we've done at the strategic comp plan meetings here? Like the hands-on with the place types, really going?
No, that happens at the strategic advisors meeting. Anyone's welcome to come, because that's what we're doing, the deeper dive.
What did I go to?
That was it. He was there too. He didn't even remember, but you were there. That's why I said it, because I know the faces that were at the meeting. So you were there. He didn't even know.
That was good. Okay. I'll go this one.
Yes.
So since this group is, from one of the earlier slides, this is what implements the vision coming from it. So this group won't have any say on what the place types are, then just how to implement it. Is that a correct understanding? And if we want to have some feedback on what those place type developments are, that we need to go and see if we can join the other group to have that feedback there.
Sure. But it is important to remember that we have members that are in this group and that group that are going back and forth. Like Derek's one of them, Gerard's another one, Eric's another one, David Walters, and then the Walters mixed up. David Walters another one. So we have people that have volunteered to do both because we're all busy. And I'm quite sure if there's something, it's a more efficient way to do it, but you're welcome to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the information presented there available in some kind of?
It's online, everything that we present, our presentation, meeting materials. And And we're gonna set up some kind of online way to provide input, so we can track it both ways
Because that
too.
might be a better way,
Yeah,
just kind of dive into the information that's being presented
yeah, yeah,
than
Yeah.
spending time sitting on it.
yeah.
Yeah, and as we're going through the zoning districts, we'll be asking Alicia and Kathy to present the place types that are the foundation for the zoning district, but then again, can remind you
Yeah.
guys how there are opportunities if you have feedback.
Okay.
So the way we've designed it too is, we'll present the place types and then it comes to the OAC. So it's kind of that way it won't be the OAC's ahead of the vision part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alicia, real quick, 3 years ago, in this process, I'm gonna ask.
7 years ago, when I wasn't here. Go ahead, Walter.
A lot of people were here. I'm gonna ask the same question now I asked then. Has the decision been made on place types? Is that done? Because we were told 3 years ago we were gonna do place types, and then then we were gonna do a comp plan, and anyway. And so, we didn't get an answer then, so let me ask you now, has a decision been made on place types? Is that done? Is that fixed? And who made the decision?
Fixed, done.
Are we,
doing it?
Are they
Yeah.
established? Are all the parameters of the place types established?
So that's what we're doing now with the comp plan. Cause
So it's still in
establishing the vision, we're in the development of it, so.
I don't necessarily mean the detail, like how many and what they include and
Are
what
we
you
doing
call
it?
them.
Yes.
Is the decision made that our future comprehensive plan will be based on a philosophy of using place types?
Yes,
And that decision's been made?
yes.
Who made that decision?
That's a decision made by the group leading this, by the director, so I mean, that's,
Yep.
that and through community
Wouldn't that
engagement.
typically be a decision to be made by the city council? I mean, it's pretty important.
I mean, the council will ultimately adopt this, and they've been regularly updated, so every single month we go to council and give an update on the comprehensive plan, so
Mhm.
they've been.
Okay, so
involved.
basically the same answer as 3 years ago.
No.
It's evolved, I won't get into.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanna know where we,
Yeah.
was this it, or
So-
was there
so-
still gonna,
so
was the
you know
comp plan
nothing
gonna
is
show us
done
different
until it's
alternative
adopted.
development choices?
So to be fair, you know nothing is done until it's adopted.
Right.
So where we are now is working with the community, our internal partners, to co-develop what place types will be to support the vision.
Got it, thank you.
That's the best I can do. Today.
Got to get a UD question in for my first meeting. With regard to this issue about community engagement, I mean, obviously, we're looking at what's the current size, like 800, 900,000 people in Charlotte. And the desire to have that feedback from the community, and the numbers I've heard are 330, 103 that have actually attended. What kind of community outreach efforts are there related to this process that might expand those reach numbers? And a new benchmark I've got is Carpo's doing an I-77 corridor study, and if I recall the presentation to the TCC correctly, they had an outreach process that reached about 15,000 responses. What are the outreach efforts that bring in the community to this beyond, meetings that add up to maybe hundreds of people in the city of hundreds of thousands?
So the numbers I just reported are 2 meetings from our strategic advisory group, which is the 100 is of 300 that have officially signed up volunteers. Overall, the first 2 phases of the project, we've had 500,000 interactions, 4,500 actual in-face interactions with people, and countless hundreds of meetings where we've gone to the community. So that's phase 1 and 2. If you're interested in the engagement summary for both phases, they're on our website. You can look at all the big numbers. But we're 500,000 interactions in first 2 phases. What's planned for this phase, and we may have to pivot amongst the current climate, but we have 6 meetings planned in the next couple of weeks. Late March, early April. That's 1 with our strategic advisors and the rest with the community, public meetings. So we're advertising, this is the plan currently, radio, social media, everything for those particular meetings, and it may be a different type of meeting, understanding where we are in our climate. That's my good this morning, so.
So is the, really, are there multiple channels for community feedback, or is it at called meetings? Is there like an online survey?
So we're doing all of that too. So we have a couple of different strategies. At the beginning of the process, and we've been monitoring our target audiences, you know, you typically get folks that are always gonna be at all meetings, but who's not showing up? So we have those demographics, which is our Hispanic community, low income, African American, senior citizens, and youth. So we have strategic strategies to reach those audiences where they are. A couple for the youth, we have Generation Nation, which is working with CMS to host a couple of meetings about the plan. Also, planning one-on-one boot camp, where we're gonna work with a couple of schools in the system. For the senior citizens, we have a project or a strategy called Coffee and Conversations, where we go meet with them to engage a plan, and we've identified some key places to do that. That might be a pivot under current environment. We might have to think differently about how to do that, and meeting and speaking with the elderly. In terms of our Hispanic population, we have focus groups that we're gonna set up with them, our homeless population, and some other key stakeholder groups that won't show up to meetings. We're just gonna meet people where they are. And in terms of our African American communities, we know that there's some collaboratives that are within the community. We're gonna meet them where they are too.
Yeah.
And Ty's doing a ton of engagement. I go to different stuff where we're meeting large groups of people where they are. On Sunday, I have Social Justice Day at Friendship Church. So there's different things that we're doing in different ways that may not be a public meeting, but we're meeting people where they are to talk about the plan. And also beefing up our social media strategy and our online presence as well. Sound good? Any other questions? Y'all know where to find me. Thank you. You're welcome.
So I'm going to transition from place types into zoning districts, because as we've heard, our place types are going to inform the kind of zoning districts that we create and implement the vision of the place types. So we're going to organize the zoning chapters of the UDO into 3 different sections. The first will be districts and standards. So we all know what a zoning district is. B1, R4, zoning districts. Standards are the regulations that are unique to those particular zoning districts. What your setbacks are, what your building heights can be, those kinds of standards, any design standards. Then we'll have use regulations. Those encompass the kinds of uses that are allowed in each district and what those uses are, definitions for those uses, and general development standards. So we'll go over each of those a little bit, and we'll give you some homework. So Alicia just talked about place types, and general industrial is the one that we're going to start working with. And we are anticipating that we'll have 2 different zoning districts that would be used in a general industrial place type. An IL is what we're calling it tentatively, which is a light industrial, and an IG, which is a general industrial. Roughly, these equate, if you're familiar with our current industrial districts, the IL would be an I1, the IG would be more like an I2, heavy industrial. But they're not necessarily going to be identical to our current districts, but this is what we're thinking. The light industrial would be more warehouse distribution, light manufacturing and assembly, where the general industrial would be the heavy industrial or the more noxious uses that would have a greater impact on surroundings. The standards, as I was talking about before, the pages will kind of look like this. So if you remember what the TOD districts look like, that's kind of our template going forward for our zoning districts. We'll have a purpose and applicability statement, which just basically explains what these districts are, where they should be used, that kind of thing. Dimensional and design standards, those are the regulatory standards. Any open space requirements. If there's a development bonus, and we use development bonuses in our TOD districts, we may use those in other zoning districts as well. These are just examples of the things that would be standards that would be unique to each district. So for each individual zoning district, they will have their own set of this type of standard. Then there are general development regulations, which are requirements or standards that are common across the board. Now, it may not be the same standard for every zoning district, but these are the types of things that will be in every zoning district, such as parking requirements. If there are minimum or maximum parking requirements, or loading zones, or bicycle parking, these will be in the general development regulations part of the zoning section of the ordinance. Same with landscaping and screening. So these are common elements to all districts. They won't be the same requirement, as I said, for all districts, but these things will be found, and these are just a couple of examples. The use matrix, you're probably familiar with this. This is the one that we have started out with in our TOD zoning districts, but since TOD, the one that we did in our TOD zoning districts, and if I can find a copy of it, if I can find the page really quickly, I will show it to you. This is what it looked like in TOD. It had the uses going down the left-hand column, and then the zoning districts across the top, and if that use was permitted in the district, there would be a P there for permitted. Since we've done TOD, the list of uses that we put in TOD were only the uses that were allowed in TOD. They weren't all the possible uses that there could be. We have now arrived at a draft of all the possible uses that we might see anywhere. Those are the uses that are highlighted in yellow. And I'll be passing out a copy of this in a little while. And actually, we could do this now, couldn't we? Sure. If I could get some help in passing these out. This is your homework. We're passing out the use matrix so far with only our TOD districts, but in the listing of all the possible uses down the left-hand column, you'll see that the uses highlighted in yellow are uses that were not in the TOD districts, but could be permitted uses in other various zoning districts. Make sense to everybody so far? Okay. Then also in your handout, following the use matrix, the last several pages are use definitions. And the definitions that were in TOD, or were not in TOD rather, are highlighted in yellow, just as they are in the matrix. You'll also see some definitions in the use definitions that are in blue type. Those are definitions that were in TOD, but since TOD, we've tweaked or modified the definition. So the definition is changing, will change, we're proposing. So what you've got in your hands, and we're going to ask you to review that and give us some feedback. You've got the use matrix, but more importantly probably at this point is the use definitions. Look at all the uses. What we're proposing is definitions, and that's the kind of thing that we're hoping that you'll give us some good feedback on. And that comes to the end of our slides. So as I explained, the feedback from here is having you take a look at what we just handed out. We'll also send an electronic copy by email to all of you and to those who weren't able to be here today. And we'd like your feedback in the form of a quick and easy survey that we will also email the link out to you. So it'll look something like this. So just shoot us your comments, and if you can't find the survey, you can hit us up with an email, and we can do it that way too. But we prefer that you do it through the survey because this is a tool that will actually log all of your comments into a spreadsheet. Makes it a lot easier for us if if you do it this way. And we're asking that you give us all of your comments by Friday, March 20th, which is a week from tomorrow, so that we'll have them for our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today on March 26th. What have I missed? Questions?
Could you double print handouts?
Double?
Two-side print handouts like this,
I suppose we could.
just on paper?
Okay. David?
Going back to the relationship with place types as an organizing element, which everybody knows has been in the books for a long time. And as we also know, that actually marks the shift from thinking about urban character first and use second. I mean, that's essentially what place types are designed to do. Hopefully that emphasis carries through, and so I'm wondering out loud to what extent we have an ambition to reduce the number of slightly different zoning districts, because we presumably we will be using place types, urban character, to smooth over the minute distinctions between use classifications, which are essentially the basis of every zoning ordinance up to now. So very often cities take advantage of this process to substantially reduce the big list down to, there'll always be distinctions.
Yes, that's our goal.
But we are headed in that direction to
Absolutely.
progress and become a little
And
more
perhaps my industrial example was ill-timed, because we're going from 2 industrial districts to propose, actually, maybe even a 3rd industrial. So that maybe isn't the best example, but yes, we hear that we have, I don't know how many individual zoning districts, maybe Shad or Lisa might know what the number is. Our goal is to significantly reduce the number of districts.
good.
You wouldn't know that by what I've just shown.
Right.
Yeah, and also industrial it's hard to make places out of industrial areas, isn't it? So,
It is.
I mean, that's, you're sort of doing necessary work there, rather than.
And we started
creating new
purposely with industrial because it's probably one of the most straightforward. Everybody kind of understands what it is and has an expectation. So, we'll cut our teeth on industrial, and then we'll work into some of the other districts that are a little more complex.
This is maybe sort of a question for Shad can help us out too. I just want to be sure that I'm understanding correctly. Everything that's yellow, highlighted in yellow, is something new. Is that correct?
Yes, new to what the uses were in the TOD district.
Okay.
Because a lot of you are familiar with the uses that you put into TOD. The ones in yellow on the handout are not to be, you won't find those in our TOD ordinance. We've added those since then.
Okay.
The ones in blue, I believe, are in the TOD ordinance, but we're proposing to tweak some of those definitions, and those are the blue.
Could I reasonably assume that definitions of a type of use or activity that might be found in more than one district all have the same definitions wherever they end up in the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, there could be a caveat to that, which I can
Well,
mention, but I'll let you finish.
In the mid to late '80s, somewhere along there, the Detroit mini theater Supreme Court case is what made governments all have to write land use codes to deal with SOBs. And Chad, I don't know, there's 9 definitions here which are new to the TOD, but I don't know if they're new to the current ordinance dealing with sexually oriented businesses. Really fun reading. I mean, whoever put these together,
Oh,
it's really fun reading.
yes, we've been
But
down
my
that
question
road.
to you is, my recollection is when we wrote that stuff back then in the dark ages, we defined an adult business or sexually oriented business by specific reference to a North Carolina General Statute provision which had far more critical criminal penalties than we could do through the land use ordinance. And I think we had maybe 1 or 2 definitions that covered everything.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering why we need so many. I just,
You might be surprised.
it's great reading.
You might be surprised to find this is shorter than what's in our current ordinance.
Well, that would be good.
I mean,
It is.
yes,
We
because
had the
we were like,
conversation.
oh my, yes.
We had a conversation with our
Put a lot of
consultant,
amendments to it over
and we
the
said,
years, Laura.
God, do we really need all of this? And our consultant, who works around the country, said,
Oh,
this is as short as we've ever done. And it is shorter than our current definition.
I love it. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, I'm good. I just,
Well, on a similar theme in terms of use, and I appreciate that, but just to give me some guidance as I started reading through this. So, for example, I see there's a distinction made in these listed uses between dormitory institutional, dormitory private. Although in the master use matrix for TOD, both types of uses are permitted. What type of case would there be where one of these dormitory uses is permitted but the other would not be?
Laura, do you want to take that one? No, I'm trying to remember what our discussion is. Laura's probably got a better recollection.
I'm not sure that we have gotten that far, but there is, and we were trying to pick up kind of the concept of people think dormitory and they're thinking it's only for a university. We're trying to pick up the concept that this may be something that over time we see in an area like South End where people, for affordability reasons or whatever, are looking for different houses. So we're trying to get different housing types, and that was the best.
Oh, I grasp that, but what I'm getting at in terms of the simplification of uses, in
Yeah.
addition to simplification of districts, simplification of uses, if there is no case where in our permitted uses, there's a distinction between dormitory institutional and dormitory private, it seems to me like it would make sense to create a definition for dormitory and let that be that.
These are exactly the kind of comments we need as we're kind of thinking through this. Because we were trying to make sure to capture everything, and one thing we want is what kind of uses aren't in here, but also where can we maybe combine them? I don't remember if Shad, we certainly had the conversation because we wanted to broaden it because it was only started out as institutional. But I think
Well, I
that's
think
exactly
going
what we need.
on what you're saying, there may be a situation where you've got a building with multiple people living that's not related to a college, and then you've got a dorm that is related to a college, and the college may be saying, you know, this one's permitted in a lower intensity zone, and the college might be saying, well, does that mean we can put this here? You know, it's on the edge of our campus, can we plot more? And that may be the reason for the distinction.
Well, I grasp that. I'm just, again, one of the things that jumps out at me, recognizing I'm looking only at TOD and not across all districts, but it just immediately jumped out at me that both are permitted, and therefore it didn't follow that there would be a distinction. And because another memory I was having, I was looking at the definition of mobile food vendor, and there's a way of vending food globally that actually isn't covered by that definition that came up some years ago. What if I outfit a retired international shipping container as a food vendor? It would not fit this definition, although you could easily see someone setting that up, dropping it off at a Soroka Office Park parking lot, vending food during lunchtime, and then picking it up and leaving it, but it doesn't match this definition, so it wouldn't be permitted. So that's.
Yes, that's
Remember that one?
exactly, yes,
Remember that
yes,
one?
yeah, that is coming back now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's exactly the kind of thinking that we need in going through this.
And so somewhere, I recognize there's, and I'll finish up with this, I recognize there's always a balance between generality and specificity, but it feels like the direction should be moving more towards generality than towards specificity. So. Thanks.
Warren, there is only one dormitory permitted in TOD currently. There's one definition.
Well, not what you passed out.
No, no. If it's in yellow, then it is a use that was not in TOD.
okay, they all reference that.
But you know, I look at the first two, page 2 of what we've got. Dormitory institutional, PPP, dormitory private, PPP. And so that just wrote.
Right, the institutional is in the TOD district, the private is a new use, just to clarify that.
But why the distinction?
Just so I understand our charge, is it safe to understand that if the definition is white, then it was in TOD, and if the definition is yellow, it's maybe further
other-
down the road, so they're just added, so I think it may be the distinction's gonna show up in zones beyond TOD.
Well, and that's why I was asking, are there any distinctions? Are there zones
Maybe
where
coming.
one is permitted, but the other is not? If so, why would one be permitted?
Well,
and the other not?
and I think the conversation, in my recollection, is that the current use defines dormitory as being associated with an educational or religious institution, and the thought came up is that it may not always be the case with a dormitory style of use, and so perhaps we should have two different distinctions, and maybe we allow one in certain zoning districts and not the other.
And that'd be the kind of thing I think we could all keep an eye on as we continue to develop.
Yeah.
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 You know, if there are these distinctions at the definitional level that don't make a difference at the district level, then they don't need to make a difference at the definition.
Mhm. And we could
You
maybe
could
perhaps
write a
combine the
definition
definitions back into a single definition.
And
You
yeah,
could write a dormitory definition that is agnostic as to who is doing it.
Yeah,
Possibly, it just depends.
possibly, yes, yeah, absolutely. Good thought. David?
Following up on the dormitory issue, that soon blurs into a form of co-housing, which occurs to me that, where would that be defined? I mean, co-housing is very normal in Europe, not so normal, but not unknown here. It's really just an evolution of the shared dormitory that you have then shared, you have a different balance between private sleeping and shared everything else.
Is it a single room occupancy maybe fits that definition?
Well, yeah, but I mean, co-housing as a movement, which is growing in the USA, not so much here,
Yeah.
but in other regions, that, just thinking ahead, to our housing issues all over the place, we want as many types of housing as we, legitimate housing.
Yeah.
And so, it's only that's only a little bit evolved from the private dormitory. So where would you have to define that in here, or are the different types of housing just handled somewhere else?
I think if what you have in mind is distinctly different, could not fit in one of these definitions because of some unique characteristic that it has,
Yeah.
that tell us what that is. And maybe we can modify one of our existing use definitions to encompass that type of housing, or maybe it needs to be its own.
Right.
yeah, I think we had someone actually come in and talk to staff yesterday about tiny homes, which started to bring up a lot of thoughts on, there are a lot of housing types that may not be in here right now. So we would really appreciate everyone looking at it through that lens. I know we've had the discussion about, and looking towards Thomas, I think maybe you were the latest one with the multiple single-family homes, like in a cottage court type of environment, not on all on their individual lots. So what are we missing in the evolution of housing types, or the things that we're not used to seeing that we need to get in here?
Yeah.
Because we probably, no, I could say we're certainly missing some things right now.
I am, I'm sure others will think.
Yes, thank you, that would be really helpful.
So these definitions then, is that, when is this is just in the future, or is this being part of the TOD, or what are these definitions, when are they getting adopted, or what's the strategy?
The ones that are currently TOD uses, we will update the definition section of the TOD through this text amendment to bring these revised definitions in.
Okay.
The rest of this table, specifically the new definitions highlighted in yellow, they are part of the UDO's master use matrix that will be applied across all zoning districts. So we've done our best, staff and our consultants, to try to come up with as comprehensive a list as we could of all possible uses that could be anywhere within the city, in any zoning district. And then it's just a matter of deciding which of those uses are permitted in each district, and then you put it, you check the box as you know how the use matrix works.
Okay.
So when you're looking at this, not only look at what we've got on the list and how we define those uses, but also what have we missed, as Laura just said? Have we thought of everything? And we know we haven't, because we know there are uses that will come about in the future that we don't have now. It's happened to us, it happens all the time. We've got new uses that just evolve as technology or society evolves. So when those things happen, we'll modify the ordinance. But as of what you know and what you can give us as feedback, tell us if you can think of something that you might want to see or anticipate seeing someday in Charlotte that we haven't covered. Terry, you have a question?
Yeah, I think I don't want to go too deep in the weeds, but I think when you start looking at the definitions, my two that jumped out at me is the commercial kitchen versus the specialty kitchen. So those are the kinds of things. Maybe for me, to get, rather than kind of going into the whys here, maybe some more information about the methodology associated with the classification. There's one that really stands out to me, that the broadcasting facility with an antenna is kind of an odd one to be in a commercial. That seems to be more industrial. So maybe you could pull out some of those things about how which check boxes got ticked to get a commercial versus industrial versus other uses. That may not be in the definition.
I'm trying to think of how we can do that.
I think what would be helpful for us, and I know this is work for you guys, but if you can put those questions in the comments, because what we're gonna do with the comments that we get is come back at our next meeting and talk through some of those things, give some feedback, tell you kind of what our thinking is, and we'll really, and I know this is not the most exciting thing, hopefully, that we'll do in this process, but it is an important foundation. We'll talk through uses at the next meeting, but we need kind of, this was our kind of best first shot after spending a day in this room with the consultants and a group of staff. Now we need a fresh set of eyes to look at this and say, hey, I don't understand why this, or you're missing this, or this definition makes no sense. But I think if we can get all of that, and we may follow up with some of you guys, we can come to the next meeting and have those discussions. And you're gonna find things that are gonna cause us, I think, to think and go like, yeah, maybe that doesn't make sense after all.
Another question. Two things came to mind, and sort of following up David's comment about housing that we may not even have yet. You know, as we talk about planning down the road, two things that pop into my head are drones and vehicle sharing. I'm curious, I mean, are you looking for us to kind of throw out some ideas and sections or categories of things that we don't even have yet that we might need to make room for?
Yeah.
I mean, without getting, you know, too Blade Runner or anything, but just.
Well, yeah.
I'm just curious, because.
Try to make the distinction between technology and land uses, because drones, are they a use? Or
Well,
they just?
There's gotta be a drone port somewhere.
A drone port,
I mean,
okay.
I was talking to somebody just last night about that as a use.
Well, we have helistops as a use, so
Okay.
yeah, maybe there's a drone port.
I don't know, I mean, it's just, you know, and then everybody talks about cars going away, nobody's gonna own a car, everybody's gonna share, what does that mean?
Yeah. John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, maybe this gets to all of these questions, but this is an evolutionary process while we're doing it, and it will continue to evolve, to your Blade Runner quip. What we've striven for as one of the principles of this process is to provide a flexible process that's also certain. So this is black and white and it's certain when it gets done. And it will need to be changed much as the TOT is having a text amendment now. So what is the mechanism? Like in other areas, the planning director was sort of the final arbiter. Sometimes it's the zoning director. Is there gonna be a final arbiter where we know there is a person if something changes in 5 years, or my project just doesn't fit into this, that we can go to? That this provides certainty when when that certainty doesn't fit, what's the flexibility?
He's sitting against the back wall, desperately trying to avoid my gaze, but generally speaking, the zoning administrator has the call over what is a use and what category it fits in. And it may be the decision that we don't have that use, and which case we need to perhaps add that use through a text amendment or something to that effect. Chad, did I say that right?
I mean, we evaluate what uses we have in the ordinance, try to find something that's most similar, what district that use is allowed in, and we would
Just
allow.
being crystal clear, providing the certainty of whom it is that I go to. That's what I want when I'm a developer trying to.
And that's,
And knowing
we
that
certainly.
you haven't had a chance to read this, there is a statement, and let's see if this addresses that, John. It's 3B on the first page of this. I think this is answering your question. A use that is not explicitly listed in the use matrix will be evaluated by the zoning administrator to determine if the use is part of a use listed. That's what the intent of that is to say, okay, so that's a little bit different, but also look at this page and see, are we saying that explicitly enough, or do we need to adjust kind of that thinking as well?
Thank you.
C, yeah, and then there's C, thank you, Thomas, a use that is not listed in the use matrix and cannot be interpreted as part of a use listed in the use matrix is prohibited.
So if they don't know about it, you can't do it.
Well, I think, Chad will look at it, and you do this all frequently anyway, right? Chad, can you talk a little bit about how you handle uses that aren't explicitly listed to the group?
The definitions of the uses that we have, what districts they're allowed in, and what use is being proposed, what use that we have in our ordinance that it most aligns with, and then see what districts those uses are allowed in, and say, okay, this use is more aligns with this, so we're gonna call it this, and therefore it's allowed in these districts.
As long as we have that mechanism, I think we've got something that can evolve, that's not stagnant, and has to be updated via text amendment.
Yeah, and eventually we will update over it, but yeah, you
Yeah,
don't wanna
it's
be
a-
like, oh, you can't do that for 6 years because we haven't gotten the.
Thank you for directing me to 3D, that's perfect.
We've always had that mechanism.
Yes.
We've always had that.
So these would be what I would consider by right uses in the area?
Not necessarily by right, some of them may have prescribed conditions.
Okay, prescribed conditions. So when you have two conflicting things, like I'm looking on page 4, and it's just unfortunate it appears this way. It says alternative correction facilities in a children's home, and right next to it is, below it is correction facilities. So by this chart, could a children's home find itself on the left of it, two different, on the left, an alternative correction facility and a correction facility on the other side, by rights, as this stands? And so the question is, how does that get arbitrated to sort of follow up on the previous discussion? I mean, that's not a desirable situation.
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not.
Page 4.
following.
Could you clarify?
These are by right, so could somebody have a children's home in the industrial district and then find out next year that a correction facility decided to build on one side, and the year after that, an alternative correction facility on the other side?
So maybe to clarify with this chart, so you've got the TOD districts across the top. What we don't have in here are the prescribed conditions. But, okay, in your scenario, let's assume there is a district or a use that is, or there are two uses that are both permitted without prescribed conditions.
Yes.
That would be your scenario. And we'll have to look at that as we go through the districts and bring those things up,
It
so.
sort of follows up on the previous thing. You're going to run across things that are illogical after you pass it. And would this be something that an administrator could arbitrate?
That would,
I mean, if it's a use permitted in the district, both uses, then they're gonna be allowed, and we have that today, and you can potentially have a jail next to a school.
Well, that's why we're rewriting, so we don't end up with stuff like that.
but I think as we go through and you start to see as we're building the districts, because so what we'll be bringing you is districts over time with the uses and the standards, you'll hopefully be able to see that, hopefully. And then it'll be like Todd. We will find things as as the ordinance is being administered that we will want to come back and, we will all want to come back and change.
David?
It seems to me that, I mean, these are absolutely valid questions and considerations, but because we're shifting to place types, which is about character of a place, the character of a place where a jail is next door to a school is illogical in the makeup of that community character place type. So, you see where I'm going with this, I would hope that by taking place types really seriously, we can filter out those things and make your job easier, because there would be less conflict, because a place type, a children's home needs a pretty supportive environment. So that will raise issues of how that might be more fitted within residential neighborhoods. There's all sorts of issues that come there. So, I mean, that's the sort of shift that I hope we change the discussion of it. That we'll be quibbling about uses forever, and that's human nature. But the parameters of the discussion shift to what kind of place are we making?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
But just to be devil's advocate, the developer wants to know when they buy a piece of property what they absolutely can do with it. And if there's a subjective place type concept, they're going to be really challenged to have to go to someone and say, does what I want to build fall into your idea of what this place should be? Instead of saying, here on this page, it says, on this zoned piece of land, I can do X, Y, and Z.
That's where we separate the place type, which is vision and policy, from the zoning ordinance, which is regulatory. So for each place type, there will be a menu of zoning districts that we think are appropriate for that particular place type. So a developer looking at a particular site, yes, he'll want to know what the place type is, but if he wants to know, or she, what they can do with that site, they'll look at the zoning district on that parcel, and then they'll go down the table of uses and see which uses are permitted for that particular parcel.
So basically, we won't have a map that only has place types. Along with place types, you'll have zoning district as well, and zoning district is what will rule.
Walter, you got your hand up.
Yeah, David hit on a good point. And I predict we'll find this more difficult as the process moves forward, is people who understand uses but not place types. And I would argue that child care center is an entirely appropriate land use as part of an industrial park, if it's done well, providing that service to the people who work there. So that's where I think this is where this is gonna start falling apart, is when you try to create the perfect environment for each conceptual area and then try to figure out what gets to go there and what doesn't, because there's all sorts of reasons why things should or shouldn't go in one place or another. And some of it deals with design, but some of it deals with more pedestrian issues. The point I wanted to make was, and I would ask you to consider, just because something can be regulated doesn't mean it needs to be regulated. And just because we can create definitions ad infinitum doesn't mean we need definitions ad infinitum. Before the last, up until the middle of, a decade ago, the zoning administrator was perfectly capable of looking at a use that wasn't listed and making a determination about where it would be appropriate for it to go, which is what Shad and his predecessors have done since the city had zoning. And there's checks and balances built into that, because if you're a neighbor next door and you think, no, that's not even, you can appeal his decision to the Board of Adjustments. I would argue in favor of fewer detailed down to the 11th decimal point uses and fewer just painful definitions that just go slice after slice after slice after slice, for a process where indeed, if we are going to rely on place types, that's where we make the determination about what works and what doesn't. I'll bet you $100 that the day this ordinance is adopted, I can come in here and find 3 things that aren't listed as a use that are in some other ordinance somewhere that I've seen. You can never define everything. You can never list all the uses.
Okay,
You
I'm
put
gonna-
co-housing in, fine, put it in, but it doesn't need 12 subsections to do it.
No,
I'm
and
gonna-
nor are we saying it should, but I think there's also looking at how do we give enough certainty without going too far. So it's gonna be an interesting balance we'll all struggle
Bingo,
with.
exactly.
And I'm gonna challenge your assumption that this is all gonna fall apart at some point.
Well, you can do that. I don't get to vote. I don't get to vote.
Well, let's see.
And we clarified the decision had already been made, so I'm not worried about that.
Another beauty to this process question, in terms of the place type, comprehensive plan, and vision, and I've seen the matrices and the principles of the technical. But I think some of this conversation has raised an interesting question. To what extent does the draft comprehensive plan and the discussion about place types acknowledge the reality of uses perceived to be unpleasant? So, again, just coming into this today and looking at this top level stuff, lots of the language used about place types creates a very positive sense of this is a great place. But any community has, and you see them some listed here, some are not, but the example that immediately springs to mind is crematorium. Nobody wants to be near a crematorium, but a community is going to have it if it's going to be a functioning community. How does the philosophy and the comprehensive plan about the vision of place type address the reality that the UDO is going to have to address about placing unpleasant uses?
Well, I'm looking at Alicia to see if you want to jump in here, and I'm not asking you to. Well, that's a valid, obviously, there are going to be some uses. I'm sorry, did you?
We talked about that in our stakeholder meeting about, there are some things that our community needs that some people may not want to live next to. So we talk about some of the commercial areas that are just strips of, drive-through after drive-through, which are necessary things in our community. What's great about place types is not just about that use. It's that building, it's the character, the form, and the things that could complement it. How do we think holistically about it? Say there's a crematorium, it doesn't look like your typical crematorium. You may not have the same access that you would from, it's thinking about all of that and some other quality of life. So we talked about it and we're thinking about it, but there are things in our community that are necessary that may not be pleasant uses today. So we're thinking about, we're talking about having hard discussion, very hard discussion.
Yeah, and
As I look at Gerard.
I'd say, even if you also look at this sheet, this is the amount of land use, specific land use information in each of the 10 or 11 place types. So a lot of that kind of discussion will probably occur here. Because I don't think, and I don't want to misspeak and look towards Alicia and Kathy, but I don't know that you guys are going to get to that level of detail about whether a crematorium goes in this place type or this place.
So that's part of our strategy in getting everyone to agree in principle, these are the types of places that we want to create. Because if we get in a conversation about, let's talk about the place types and then let's map them where they all should go, we will be here 2, 3, 5 years from now. So we're gonna get everyone to agree in principle, let's talk about the types of places we want to create aspirationally to support our vision. And we'll have those harder conversations during the mapping, where we can sit down and really look at these places. And there might be tweaks, it won't be perfect, but we'll co-design how it all works together and be real strategic and intentional about it through the mapping process. And I imagine that's the same thing that will happen in the zoning district. During the mapping, that's when you have those really hard conversations.
And this is where, as I'm sure you're all doing, looking hard at precedent, other places, other nations even. I mean, it's really well known. This is something I learned when I came to America, that cemeteries here are handled completely different to how they're handled back in my home country. I went to Harvard, Boston, my youngest son lives there, and he said, we've got to go visit the cemetery, because it's a beautiful landscape park. And so, what sounds like unpleasant, I mean, there are crematoriums which are in neat urban buildings, which comes back to, I hate to say it, comes back to design, and actually how you organize buildings which house potentially upsetting uses. It's not actually the use itself, it's how it's handled in the community.
And it's the impact that it has on surroundings. Does it emit noxious fumes? Is there noise? Is there light that would impact its surroundings? And it's not just, as you said, not just views. Jared. Gerard, sorry. I'm gonna get that.
Lisa, thank you for bringing that up. We did have a conversation about that. I think Eric kind of alluded to it a little bit about the environmental justice needs when we place general industrial next to residential without like an appropriate buffer. So we explored that a little bit around the Hoskins area. But I wanted to ask a question too, just for an education standpoint. How does the area plans that will come down the road relate to the comprehensive plan? Because to David's point, like, we have a plan and it's kind of all embedded into kind of like an organizing document the developers can refer to. Is that going to be related to our comprehensive plan? Or will this be?
I should just say that.
Yeah.
So where we are now, Gerard, and the rest of the in terms of how we do area place types will essentially become that new classification, how we think about communities or creating complete communities. And the process that we think about, and we'll try it out when we start managing the place types, is by districts, like kind of divide the community up in a logical way around having that more detailed conversation about the place types. It'll be not just place types, we'll have conversations about infrastructure, like we did last week. It was a similar process, where we looked at an area, took the place types, what might that look like on the ground, what other policies, strategies, and projects do we need to think about to support creating that complete place. So that's our way of thinking how we will do area planning or community planning in the future. And the way we're thinking about it, it's all in my head, I've been here 2 months, is that we'll still continue to have those conversations in the community about vision, doing corridor studies, design studies. Those things are currently happening. They may not be adopted, but once the comp plan gets adopted, we look at an assessment every 2 years that says, all right, where are we with the community? Things are changing because they're always changing, and we'll update the comp plan every 5 years and do a big overhaul every 10. This is in my head, and maybe do with Allison and the rest of the team. But other communities have done this before, so it's nothing new. It's just we're evolving and trying to make sure we do what's right for Charlotte. And the way we've done plans before, we could never keep up with the changing community and provide the land use guidance that we need from a development perspective, just quality of life, and just how we think about how we grow and how we create place. It's changed. So we gotta come with a new game plan. And this is our way with place types
we're not
UDO
Oregon.
consultant, Camiros, has worked in other cities that have used place types, so they're familiar with how the linkage between ordinance and place types. Thomas, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had two questions. First one was back to your point. No, this is easy. So the problem with area plans is that they're static, and I like the idea that there's place types and that you guys are going to be doing comp plans more routinely so that they can evolve because the city's constantly changing. So what made sense 20 years ago for that area might not make sense. Will there be an ability for the private side to initiate an update to a remap in the area? So, because, you know, if you're looking at it every 2 or 5 or 10 years, an update, like, well, we're looking at like, really, this has already kind of changed. Is there going to be a private advocate or a way for the private sector to advocate for that area to be relooked at again to potentially remap it for something that's more conducive to the use that's going on?
We've had that policy for years.
So,
Yeah, have you tried to revise an area plan before?
Right. The opportunity is provided by existing policy. Whether it ever gets done or not is a different story.
Okay.
right, so when I started to walk the point, that was the case. You did something with the plan. When you did something with the zoning recommendation, then there was something that you did different with the plan. I looked at, and I like the way Nashville does it, where when you go for a zoning change, there's a land use change too, but it's not parcel, it triggers an update to that whole district. There's something happening here that the developer wants to do that may be a broader change that we don't need to look at. I can't commit to that's what we're going to do, but we are thinking about how that might
I don't
happen.
necessarily need that answer now, but it's definitely.
Right, that's something.
Because what we get stuck with is we want to zone a property, but everyone looks back like, well, area plan doesn't support it, so I'm not gonna support it, so you get stuck.
Right, you get stuck until you wait for that big update.
Right.
So there are communities that are always doing, everybody's doing, we're thinking about it for sure. And also thinking about, I'm killing my saying this, and we don't do these zones every month, I don't know.
I wouldn't kill you for saying that. There might be some other people that would like.
I'm just trying to share the pain, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of things on the table that we'll have to figure out. But we wanna make sure we're providing good guidance for the community, so they'll know what to expect, for developers, for folks that are wishing to invest in our community, so they'll know what our vision is and what are the tools to get there. So it's all on the table. I'll try to.
Good.
I mean,
That's all I ask.
I think we recognize all that Charlotte is changing and evolving very rapidly, and so we will have to do something to respond to that, because, I mean, an area plan 5 years ago, it may be completely different kind of shot, so.
That's also kind of the guide for what we're allowed to do with it, so that's where you get
Right,
stuck.
right.
And no one wants to be stuck trying to build someone else's vision.
Well, I don't see the comprehensive plan, Lisa, I'm stepping in your territory. But, so correct me if I'm wrong, being that level of specificity that you would have in the area plan that would sort of prevent things, you know, that
Yeah.
create problems.
Well, it depends on how specific it gets to uses allowed in each one.
Right.
And I think to his point, many times said, like, form is more important than actual use, and I hope that's, I'll certainly be diving into the things that have been going on the other side to kind of see, make sure that that's still kind of the guiding idea, that use is less important than form in a lot of ways.
And you mentioned updating the comp plan, so if you don't know, there's new planning enabling legislation that's working its way through the state level, and has it been approved finally?
Yeah.
Has been approved 160D, that requires communities to do a comprehensive plan. We didn't have that kind of requirement before, and I believe it also requires that they be updated every 5 years. Is that the understanding? Or,
I do not.
no? Anybody know 160D? I thought it required the plans to be updated every 5 years.
I don't remember.
A reasonable time.
Reasonable time. Well, that's clear.
Great thing to put in.
We're already doing that.
Yes, I suppose
27
the reasonable time would be different depending on where you work. Any other
Yeah, I
questions?
had a second part,
Yes.
real quick. How will this plan interact with historic neighborhoods? Will it override it? Because the historic neighborhoods.
Which plan?
The comp plan, the area plans, the whole little thing. So the little neighborhoods that have secluded themselves away from what the vision for the city are, they get to kind of keep that seclusion.
That are designated as a historic district?
Mm-hmm.
Be careful.
I know there are certain communities in this room, but I think I'll ask the question.
Well,
Let's see
that's
if I
the whole
do.
community talking about, I don't know what you're talking about. Examples are always easy.
Yeah, be careful. So I just repeat again with the comp plan and its adoption, we're just, adopting the place type palette, we're not mapping. That's why I think.
But eventually you will map, right?
We will map, but we wanna have those very specific conversations about, and it's land use, so it's not zoning, we won't override districts like that. There actually has been some conversation about how do we protect newer neighborhoods in a different way? What kind of tools do we have to do that? So we'll have that conversation when we start looking at mapping. We gotta think about it, but we're not open. I'll say it today, no, we're not.
And for folks that don't know, historic districts, the local historic districts are established through an overlay zoning district. And we will have an ongoing overlay zoning district for historic districts.
So that will stay.
Yes. What that zoning district does not allow you to say you can't build a certain use if it's allowed in the underlying district. It's how you build that use. So, sorry that for Thomas and yay for others, that is going to remain in our
What makes you
ordinance.
think that I didn't want it?
What you said a few minutes ago, maybe. Oh, we got it. We think.
We have the room for another half hour. We don't have to stay here if you don't want to, but we're here to take any other questions that you might have. And if you do, that's great. If not, feel free to just finish your conversations. Eric?
I was just gonna say, could you suggest in your email for, if we do a follow-up, just maybe some additional homework for folks who haven't heard of form-based codes or actually read the definition and what that's all about, because that's.
I want to stop you before you go too much further. This isn't a form-based
It
code.
isn't, but
Okay.
there's a lot of elements.
We are using some form-based elements.
They're
So
fudging pretty much.
Yeah.
right?
it is.
It's a
We've
hybrid,
always
yeah.
said it's a hybrid. So you're welcome to research form-based codes, but just know that this is not a strictly.
Right, but I think it'd be helpful for folks.
Probably the best thing we can make sure we have in everyone's hands, and I think they have it, is the TOD districts, because that kind of gives you an idea of at least our more urban districts. Now, some of the kind of standards we have in TOD, we won't have in an industrial district, but that's probably the best resource.
And since these definitions leverage off of our TOD definitions, I think it'd be really good to go back, if you're unfamiliar with the TOD, the work that this body helped with, a great spot.
Before I turn it over to our chair, Tony Lathrop, I just wanted to cover a couple of things for those of you who may have come in a little bit late, just some housekeeping items. We are recording the meetings. We are not using Facebook Live anymore as we did last year. We have our own Charlotte UDO YouTube channel, so we'll upload the video recording of this meeting to the YouTube channel maybe by the end of business day, certainly by tomorrow. We'll email you a link, but you can also go to the Charlotte UDO website and click on the little arrow YouTube icon, and it should take you to our YouTube page. And then I just have one other thing on lunches. I said this earlier, but if you missed it, we're spending a lot of money on lunches that because we try to order enough for everybody that we think may come, and not everybody is able to attend. So it looks like we've got maybe 10 or a dozen leftover lunches, and those things are costing the taxpayers money. So to try to minimize waste, we'll be sending out an email before each meeting, a couple days before each meeting, with a choice of sandwich type or salad type, whatever we've been serving. Probably not going to deviate much from our menu. But we'll ask you to just tell us what you want so that we know who's coming and the type of box lunch you'd like, and we'll put your name on the lunch. And sorry to say this, but if you don't tell us ahead of time what lunch you want, you may not have a box lunch ready for you when you get here. This will just help us keep track of who's coming and hopefully save the taxpayers a little bit of money. Tony, did you?
I just want to thank you all for all you've done to pull this together and prepare so diligently and give us this good information. And thank the group for your ongoing time in doing this. This is quite a time commitment. And also for the thoughtful and rigorous discussion today. Probably 5-6 years ago, when I was chair of the Planning Commission, I kept just being a broken record about the need to have a rigorous and inclusive and transparent process for this to build a good consensus. And this today is a great microcosm of that. Just one little piece of what's going to be a big consensus on this. So I urge everybody to keep asking these tough questions and digging into it. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This tells me where I can